what I learnt from writing all those messages from money, which also makes sense to me as a human being, is that we know somewhere inside ourselves what feels about right for us. And for somebody, for example, who is deeply fascinated by doing business at scale, many millions of dollars might feel right for them as revenue for their business because it matches their contribution to the world. They're doing something that requires a lot of money in order to do it. Somebody else might not be interested in business particularly, and it may be that their primary focus in life is bringing up their family to be happy and to live a good, just like a good life. And they don't need those multiple millions of dollars. They need a more modest amount that suits their focus, because we don't all want the same things. But I feel what happens in our society a lot is that we get out of touch with what's right for us.
Welcome back to the show, Disruptors. I'm your host, Hale. This is Point of Impact. Today we're asking the question, how's your relationship with money? Statistically, for many of us in the U.S., yours truly included, we've had a, let's say, tumultuous romance with our dollars and cents. Tell me if you've ever felt like this. We like having money around. We don't want to see it go. We're jealous of others who have money and covet what they've got. We're afraid that we'll lose what we have and no more money will come in the future. It's a tough way to, it's a tough way to have a relationship with our dollars and cents. Well, our guest today, Sarah McCrum, is a Cambridge graduate and has studied with Eastern philosophers and energy masters. And she's got an entirely different perspective on money. In fact, what she believes is money is units of energy. In fact, there's a reason. There's an ebb and flow, just like water and electricity. There's a reason we call it currency. So this is an interesting conversation on the mindset we have behind money. So if you are looking to rekindle that passion with your dead presidents, listen ahead. And here's my conversation with Sarah McCrum. Sarah, welcome to Point of Impact.
Thank you very much. I'm happy to be here.
Well, I tell you what, I've been very excited to have you on the show, and I'm very curious about a great number of things that you've written and said, but most in particular, starting, I guess, from the beginning, is whatever brought you to write a letter. Was it from your money to you, or from money to you?
From money to me. Well, yeah, it's kind of a series of messages, really, from money to me. What brought me there at the time was a business failure, an extremely painful business failure. Probably every business failure is pretty painful. It was tied up in that particular case with a Chinese master. I'd been training with a Chinese master for many years. And when you're in that kind of system, you've learned a great deal. We had learned a great deal about how to solve all kinds of problems. We'd learned a lot about energy, because that's what Chinese masters teach you about, life energy and how it works. And so to fail in that context is a kind of like a double failure, because you're not only failing in a normal business way, but you're also failing your master, your teacher, the person who's taught you how to succeed. So it was a very, very difficult time, and it left me personally and my colleagues without even enough money to pay our rent. Literally, we were completely wiped out. And so that, I think that got me to do something that I would never normally have done. My friend got me to come to a money boot camp. It was a kind of weekend of people promoting their programs about how to make money. And I was given a little book, which was called How to Become a Money Magnet. And it had exercises in it at the end of each chapter. And one of the exercises said, what would money like to say to you? And I was journaling, and my pen started writing. And this was not my writing. And what happened was that what appeared to be money started writing through my pen, I would like to tell you to love me. And then it went on and it said, I am an energy. I'm very powerful and beautiful. And I wrote for about 2 pages of notes, this incredibly beautiful message from money, from the energy of money, we can say, which made it, first of all, feel like a very alive thing. It was somehow a thing. It was something very real. And it radically changed any perspective that I had had on money before. And after that, what happened was I ended up writing lots and lots of messages like this. Every day I sat down with my little notebook and asked money what it would like to say to me. And it turned out that it had a lot of things it wanted to say to me, enough in the end to fill a book. So, it was a very unusual experience.
I'm just imagining you going through this exercise, and frankly, I can't even imagine what staring at Benjamin Franklin or even George Washington, them staring back at me, and most of the time, my money isn't very communicative. I say hello, and it generally says goodbye. But you talk about having people's relationship with money, and I of course listened to your audiobook, and love money that loves you, because in it the letter is in the beginning. It says that it's like you said, energy. It loves you. It is very ethereal. There's a philosophical about it, and most of the time, people try to. It's like a numerical formula. It's logic, but there is this thermostat, or we do have, I guess, a love-hate relationship, and some people tend to hate it more than love it. Where does that come from? Why do we covet it? Why are we afraid of it? What is this relationship, and how do we? What are the steps to begin to heal it?
Well, I think one of the reasons that we covet it, that we want it so much, actually for me, I think that human beings really long to experience certain things which are pretty universal. We tend to long to experience love. We love to experience joy and freedom and peace. These are things that are universal human values, or more or less universal. And I think that we actually long to experience abundance at some level. We actually, somewhere deep in ourselves, we long for a rich experience of life, let's say. And I don't mean that we long, therefore, to have lots of money. Some people do, and some people don't care about it very much. But I do feel that desire for an abundant life, for a rich experience, for a rewarding experience here on this time we have on this planet, is shared by people who have very little and people who have a lot. And so at some level, I think money has come to represent that in some way for us. We've come to feel like if we have lots of money, it's the closest we can get to that kind of abundance. It's like, people say to me, oh, I want freedom. So I just want to be able to do what I want, when I want, wherever I want, with whoever I want. And usually when they get that, it doesn't feel like freedom. But they think that that's what freedom is like. And the same with money. We think, well, if I have money, I will be rich. I'll be able to do whatever I want. It doesn't usually work out that way when you get it. So it's become a kind of proxy, or a representative of something that we desire in our hearts, in our souls, in our inner being, if you like. Why are we so afraid of it? I have to say that I personally think there are two main reasons for that, which are probably connected. One is we don't really understand what it is. So we tend to think that money is just a bunch of numbers. And I think that religions and spiritual traditions have made us, to a large extent, feel very confused about money, because we have been taught in so many ways that you're more virtuous if you're poor, that if you're rich or if you're wealthy, you run the risk of maybe corrupting your virtue, that money is dangerous or it's the root of all evil. We hear often in Western society, but in Eastern societies as well, that the monk with a begging bowl is revered as a good person, the epitome of a good person. So we learn from a very young age that money can make you into a bad person. And most people don't really want to be a bad person. So I think they internalize a conflict about it that makes them afraid, and it just makes them confused. Like, do I go after money? I want to take care of my family. Maybe I'd like to experience success. Do I go after my purpose or my goodness, my fundamental feeling of being a moral and ethical human being who has values and cares about things? And if I do that, will I lose money? Like, we have some real issues around it. And what I find is that people internalize the conflict because it's almost unbearable. It's very, very difficult to look at. And so they just have a struggle inside them that sometimes comes out as fear, sometimes comes out as greed, and all kinds of other emotions.
I believe you wrote something about greed and it not being in and of itself right or wrong, but if there's a like a base level or the right amount for you or your desires, and if you gather too much, you lose the connection to that true desire. So if you're hoarding money and just saving it, and like you said, it's not about abundance, or then you can't control it. You can't. It will slip away from you. Can you explain a little bit more about how that works? What do you mean by that?
Yes. What I learnt from writing all those messages from money, which also makes sense to me as a human being, is that we know somewhere inside ourselves what feels about right for us. And for somebody, for example, who is deeply fascinated by doing business at scale, many millions of dollars might feel right for them as revenue for their business because it matches their contribution to the world. They're doing something that requires a lot of money in order to do it. Somebody else might not be interested in business particularly, and it may be that their primary focus in life is bringing up their family to be happy and to live a good, just like a good life. And they don't need those multiple millions of dollars. They need a more modest amount that suits their focus, because we don't all want the same things. But I feel what happens in our society a lot is that we get out of touch with what's right for us, with our own values and our own desires. And we feel like, oh, I should be successful like somebody else. And we put pressure on ourselves to make money in a way that doesn't feel right to us. And many people do jobs that they hate because they have to make money. So our relationship with money then gets rather distorted, and we don't really know what we want. And that's what leads to an unhealthy type of greed. So what I learned is that it's not about whether you want a lot of money or not. That's not the question. You know for yourself who you are. But if you want money that is going to kind of almost be dead in your life, like you just want to collect money, more and more and more of it, because it somehow feels like your security, that gets out of balance and doesn't support your health and your thriving and your well-being. Or if you deny money and you say, oh, no, I don't want any money, I don't care about money, that's also that's a denial of yourself and your own needs. So in many ways, it's about right sizing. It's about us finding what's right for us, and that might change at different times of our life, and having a healthy relationship with money rather than a relationship that's based on a fear of scarcity, for example, or a fear of the power of money, or all the other fears that we can invent around it.
How do we heal this relationship? How do we turn around those thoughts and the words we say that, there's a negative connotation in the speech we use? What are the steps we take to change that relationship?
The first step that we must take is change what we know and think about money, because it would be very difficult to change the relationship with money if you just continue thinking the same things about it. That's not really possible. So part of the problem is that we have grown up with all these ideas about money that I actually think are very inaccurate. I found that when I learnt about money in this way, that came from these messages, if you like, these letters. I like the way you call it a letter from money. What I learned is that it's something rather different from what we've learned. So we've learned that money is scarce, and our economy is based on scarcity. Money is actually, the energy of money is very abundant, in fact. And we don't need to put the constraints around us that we often do. It's actually safe for lots of people to want lots of money. It isn't if I take more, you get less. Money doesn't work that way. So there's a fundamental misunderstanding that we have in our system. And if we keep that misunderstanding, we're going to keep operating from a place of scarcity. So we're not going to change. So the first thing for me is to start to question what you know about money and educate yourself about different understandings of money. For example, I say that money is an energy. If you speak to economists and people who work with big money in the world, as I have done, they automatically know that money is an energy. They understand that. They might not use the language in the way that I do, but they see the movement of power around the planet, which is really what money's doing, is constantly moving and shifting power and dynamics between people all the time. So they see it as an energy and they'll describe it that way. But most people don't. They've never thought about it like that. So when we start to open up our thinking and learn about it, we start to change what we believe, and that starts to change things. And then the other thing that I think is essential, and my book teaches all the way through, is that we need to find out how to relax about money. Being worried and stressed and afraid is very detrimental to our relationship with money. And anybody who has a husband or a wife or a partner knows that. Being worried, stressed, and afraid about your relationship is detrimental to your relationship. It never brings a good vibe in. You know that, don't you? I know that. We all know that. So we need to learn to relax about money.
Wife. Sorry, a conversation with my wife. She used to be terrified of it, terrified of losing it, and keep taking risks. So I totally understand. Sorry, go ahead.
Well, it's just so I think that we know the essence of a relationship. We know that being relaxed, enjoying, even bringing love to your relationship, there's a foundation of a good relationship is love, actually works better. When you understand that you have a relationship with money, with this energy that is moving in your life all the time, then you can bring the same principles to your relationship with money. So relax, enjoy, love. That's my little formula. Those three words, they come through the book over and over and over again. Relax, enjoy, love. If you bring those actually to any relationship, including your relationship with money, you have a much kinder experience of that relationship.
Now, like you said, it flows. That's why they call it currency, right?
Exactly.
So you call it energy, and you're also, is it a Chinese energy master? Does that mean that that was financial training? Oh,
No, it wasn't
uh,
financial training. So the Chinese have, for thousands of years, explored this concept of energy, or we can call it life energy. The Chinese call it qigong. That qi is the same word as you get in Tai Chi, which is an ancient Chinese practice to balance your energy, the energy that flows through your system, through your body. Qigong is also another famous Chinese practice. The qi is energy, and the gong means practice, essentially, energy practice. And Chinese people used to practice these things in the park every morning. You don't see it much these days, but they used to be in their thousands, in their millions, every single morning doing exercises to take care of their energy. So our energy is the intangible thing that makes us alive. It's the difference between a live body and a dead body. Physically, they're exactly the same. There is no
mhm.
difference in the moment that a body dies physically from the body that was alive, except that aliveness. The aliveness is the energy. And that energy, now we have quantum science, which has proven that energy, this aliveness, if you like, is the foundation of all of life, not just human beings, and all the spaces in between us. So the Chinese have studied this for thousands of years, brought it into their medical practice. So acupuncture is also entirely based on their understanding of energy. And that's what I was studying. So it was really, we learned a lot of healing and a lot of health because the Chinese built an entire understanding of health and how you maintain your health around their knowledge and their wisdom about energy. We learned a lot about relationships and the energy of relationships, which we all experience. You know, we all experience the push and the pull, the times when you feel like you can hardly go near your wife. You know, her energy's pushing you away, or the other way around, and the times when it pulls you in. This is this hidden dynamic. It's not her body, it's not her words, it's not her the way she looks at you, but it's something in between. It's in the space, so to speak, that we feel at a subtle level, because we're very subtle beings. We're very sensitive, we're intuitive. So we feel this energy, but we can't see it. And it's operating in every dynamic throughout the universe all the time. So that's what I was studying. And of course, when you study that, you're really studying life. So rather than studying finance or studying health or studying biology, I was studying life and the patterns and the principles of life itself.
And an example or perspective that you put in the book was that there are trillions of dollars in the world. There's plenty of money in the world, enough for everyone on the planet to be a billionaire many times over. So why do we have such a fear of scarcity? So I guess to put it in a more concrete or tangible, I guess logical versus intuitive uh, perspective, it's a holding unit marker for value. And the more value we can create in this world, the more that this money will flow to us as energy
Yeah. And flow between us, because really it
or flow
flows
between
between
us.
us. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I think that you are right on the center of the point there, that money is a representation of value. It doesn't, a piece of paper with a dollar note on it and a promise, or I don't know, in Britain where I grew up, I promise to pay the bearer the sum of £1 or £50 is what it says on the bill, on the note itself. That doesn't have any value at all in itself as a piece of paper, but it has a value because we agree that it has a value. It doesn't even have the value of gold behind it now like it used to, but it has power because of our agreement. And if I give you $50, for example, you can do something with that $50. You can take it to the shop and buy something because the shopkeeper is also in the agreement. So we have a massive social agreement around money as a representation of value. And the reason why money is unlimited, as it says in the book, and we could all be billionaires if we wanted to, it's always like, if you want to, is because there is no real limit to the value that we can provide for each other, except the limit of our imagination. Now, most of us probably wouldn't imagine billions of dollars worth of value and might not need to, but there's no reason why we couldn't. So that's what it's about. And the more value we create for each other, the more exchange there is, the more the money flows. So money's not limited by how many dollars have been printed. Actually, the limit is on our willingness to contribute value to other people who want to buy that value. The more we do that, the more exchange happens, and therefore the more movement of money there is, and therefore the more wealth there is.
And a greater willingness to receive as well, right? And that comes from our thoughts and our language. When you were talking before about how we are, the language around money, how we talk about it. I need this, or money is the root of all evil, versus living that life, or thinking abundantly. And can you give an example of the positive versus the negative when it comes to two different perspectives on those thoughts?
Yes. So, for example, you see something online or in a shop and you really want to buy it. You feel like, yeah, that's something I would love to have. It's a very, very simple example. And one person says, I can't do that. That would be greedy. I don't deserve it. I'm not worthy of having something as nice as that. Let's say it's something really nice. If you're it might be some clothes that you really like, or it might be a fishing rod if you're into fishing. It's some bit of kit that you would actually absolutely love to have. That's perhaps a little bit beyond what you feel you're justified in buying. So
It's
one
too
person says,
lavish.
"Yeah, I'm not worthy of it. People like me can never have things like that, even if they can afford it." And the other person says, "I want that, and I really feel like that's going to make my life better. That's going to enhance my life. I'm going to buy that." And maybe that person can't afford it right now. And they don't say, I'm going to put it on my credit card, which is really like saying, I can't afford it. I'm going to use somebody else's money to buy it. They say, I'm going to save up, like we teach children, I'm going to save up so that I can get this thing that's going to enhance my life. Now, those two people are on a really different trajectory of life, because one is constantly defining themselves in terms of their lack of worthiness, their lack of self-confidence, their fear around money. And you can feel the scarcity in it. You can feel the limits that go around that. They don't invest in themselves. The other person invests in the value of their own life. And in order to do that, you have to be able to receive. Like, actually, if I go and buy something, I have to receive the thing too. Even with myself, I have to be able to receive. Not only receiving money from other people, but investing in myself so I receive the value that I have decided I want to bring into my life. And if you do that wisely, that investment will pay off. And maybe that thing you bought will give you more happiness, or maybe it's something that's actually going to give you a reward in another way. It's a genuine reward for your investment in yourself and your quality of life.
I I say this all the time, not just with money, but when it came to my own injuries, my disabilities, it never was can't do that, or I can't afford that, or I can no longer do that because I don't have eyesight. It was how can I? Uh, I instead of I can't afford it, how can I afford this? What do I need to change, or what do I need to do to be able to reach that level?
That's such a
And
simple and clear example. Yes, exactly.
right, and it's just if I don't have the money to afford something, make that investment in myself, or my wife and I enjoy investing in real estate. If I don't have that money, how do I create the conditions to where I will have the money? If that's partnerships, if that's through increasing my output elsewhere, uh, yeah. So I totally agree with that, and I
And it
think
might not be that you can do it right now. You might want to invest in a particular piece of real estate or a style of real estate investing that you can't afford right now. But that how can I thinking brings it towards you so that maybe in a year's time or 5 years' time or whatever it is, you can afford it. Whereas if you have the I can't do it thinking, you're not going to be there in 5 years' time either because you don't take actions in that direction. You take actions in a different direction, which is really self denial. And look, this happens at every level. That's one of the things I think is really important. This is not just about poor or rich. Actually, there are many wealthy people who live with a great deal of scarcity and fear as well, and they accumulate wealth. Maybe there's because of that fear, or because of a need to have control in the world. But that how can I, which is a very entrepreneurial way of thinking, is so empowering for anybody at any level of wealth or lack of it.
and there's that added thing about making those connections, right? If I don't have the money flowing to me, how do I develop the relationships and those connections with others so that I'm prepared for the flow when it's necessary? So that's in developing relationships with others, and I guess having conversations with Andrew Jackson and Ben Franklin. Uh,
That's your way.
but when you're developing this relationship with money, I'm sure there are certain habits or techniques. Or do you have some sort of ritual that helps you stay in that perspective, that frame of mind?
I'm personally not very good at rituals. I think they work very well for some people, but I'm not much of a ritual type person. But I do a lot of work. You know, I start my day every day with inner work. I always pay attention to relaxing. I always pay attention to my energy. And if it feels off or if I feel negative, I will I start with relaxation because for me, what happens when I relax and what I learned from my Chinese masters is that, you know, when you relax, you soften, your body softens, you open up actually, and literally more energy flows through you. And that energy, we talk about fresh energy flows through you. And that energy makes you feel good. And so my fundamental practice is always around relaxation and making myself feel good. Because when I feel good, I also feel good about money. And then I'm not the person who's getting in the way of money. Now, obviously, we all have those old beliefs and patterns, and some of them can be very, very hidden. So my experience is that the further I go, the more the old stuff gets turfed out. And, you know, I have to examine old beliefs that I had no awareness of maybe 5 years ago or 10 years ago. I was dealing with another lot of beliefs at that stage. And also, as I expand my capacity and my vision, I need new ways of approaching money or of relating with money. I can't just rely on what I was doing 5 years ago. So there's a constant process of development there. And opening up new approaches, new ways of thinking and feeling about it, and letting go of old ways. And so that's how my kind of energy work works. It's always like opening up to the new and letting go of the old. And relaxation is the fundamental practice that I have that supports that.
I don't understand relaxation. Maybe it's our what is it, the grind mentality. Just work harder, and I know that after you work out, you need to stretch, and you need the rest for your body to rejuvenate, to rebuild.
Actually get stronger. If you work out all the time and you didn't have the rest, the relaxation, you would just destroy yourself, in fact. So that relaxation is where the strengthening really happens, from my understanding. I'm not terribly scientific about exercise, but I've seen enough to know that. Relaxation, so it's a funny word. I often talk about energy relaxation, but that won't mean anything unless you know what I'm talking about. We tend to think of relaxation as being something like having a glass of wine or reading a good book or going on holiday. And yes, they're all forms of relaxation, but I learned it as a technique, if you like. So when I relax, I sit down very, very quietly. I stop thinking about things and I open myself up. And I've been trained to do this, and I train other people to do it. And immediately I start to feel a flow inside my body. It's just like this really beautiful, subtle energy, and I can feel it coming in. And it feels like refreshment coming into my body, literally. Anyone who's done, probably most people who've done some kind of martial art might have experienced this at times, or anyone who's creative and experiences the flow of ideas. It's a bit like that, but it's not ideas. It's just a flow of freshness, literally. It's like when you get up early in the morning and the air feels fresh and clean. At 11 o'clock the night before, it felt kind of dirty, like full of all of the stuff that's happened all day, and it gets cleaned out in the night. That's something the Chinese were very aware of. We're rather similar. We have a way that we can kind of clean out our energy and get in touch with the freshness of life, the fresh energy of life, and clear out the old energy. And I do that every day, and that maintains my health. I haven't needed to see a doctor in 35 years now, because I do that every day. And it maintains my state of mind. It keeps me much more relaxed about things. When bad things happen, I don't freak out because I know how to relax. So it is different from sitting down with a glass of wine or watching television. It is a practice. It's not the same as meditation, but it's related, I would say. And it's tremendously, tremendously powerful. Like, for such an innocuous little word like relax, the power that it has in our life, if you balance that with challenge, you take on a challenge. I'm sure you're the kind of person who takes on a challenge. If you can take on a challenge that gives you pressure and then constantly play with the dynamic of how do I relax in this challenge? When you're relaxed, you're more intuitive. So you get a lot of additional information, not just your mental, rational information, but that intuitive information as well. You tend to perform much better. So it's a very good combination.
Yes, I understand there's time for entertainment and time off from work, and there's time for play. I would say that falls under the category with having a glass of wine or watching TV. That's all entertainment. But then there's what you're talking about, the meditation, relaxation, relaxing, stillness. And I've just, every time I've attempted to do meditation, I even have one of those bolster pillows, and I've gotten the guided meditation apps. And while somebody is talking about calm forest breezes and all that, I'm thinking, did I do I need to get some new underwear for the boys? They've outgrown it. And I wonder if there's enough lunch meat in the refrigerator. It just might, I, I, how is this? Of course, this is a practice, right? Uh, but it's also something we need to incorporate into our lives each day. Or do you do this daily, more than once a day?
I do it. I do it daily. I think we do need to incorporate it into our lives. We don't all have to do the same thing. Like, the same thing doesn't work for everybody. We need to incorporate something that takes us into that more subtle aspect of life. Why do we need to? Because it works. Because it's been demonstrated over and over and over again, whether you look at it from a medical point of view or from a health, like from a well-being point of view or a mental health point of view or a performance point of view. It's been demonstrated time and time and time again that it works. But look, Aaron, one of the things I want to say is I can sit down at 5:30 in the morning or 6 in the morning, whenever I get up, and start my relaxation practice. And it might be for 5 or 10 or 15 minutes, sometimes for 20 minutes. I'm thinking, oh, have I sent that email? What have I got to do today? Oh, that person said something horrible to me yesterday. But the thing that I do is I go a bit longer and I insist on arriving at a place where I feel some change in me, where I'm not just thinking about those things, because I've got all day to think about that stuff and to deal with it. But I do the relaxation to nourish me, to give me something not the same as I'm doing all day. And I think a lot of the problems that people have when they learn to meditate is, you're taught to meditate for 5 minutes at the beginning. And I understand that because, you don't want to, you just take a little bite. But most people don't get anything in 5 minutes. It doesn't work for them. And so they get really discouraged. But, we don't want to say, well, sit down for half an hour, because you think, well, I could never do that for half an hour. Even 5 minutes was really difficult for me. And so people give up. Or like for me, it's very difficult for me to do imagine the calm breezes. That's not, I wouldn't do well with that at all. It's just like I
But
can't
there's
stand
also
that kind of visualization, but it works wonderfully for some people.
Yeah, there's also the counterproductive pressure you place on, one places on oneself to get it right. So, like, I will meditate. I will find euphoria, or I will find stillness. And I think it's I don't know, it may be different for others, because I joke. But when you said it's extremely powerful, it is. I many years ago learned transcendental meditation, and while I don't practice it often, I have pulled it out of my back pocket a couple of times. Right after my illness, put in the hospital, had the most terrible headaches, because I had bacterial meningitis trying to kill me from my brain out, and nothing was working. No medications could help it. So I dulled the pain. I managed the pain with TM. So I do understand the power of it. But when I sit down to try to do my, good old fashioned maintenance meditation, I put pressure on myself to kind of try to achieve that kind of power before the workday starts.
So I think you're talking about something really important here, because many of us in times of crisis are able to pull out something. Some people will pull out prayer. And there are remarkable stories all over the world of people where extraordinary things have happened because they prayed, or they meditated, or they found another place inside themselves that they didn't know they had. And then and a lot of the performance teaching around this is in a way trying to use that to boost performance. I actually don't believe in that kind of performance teaching for that very reason, because we are not actually living in a crisis situation all the time. We don't want to keep our body in that kind of state where, you're about to die from meningitis, or you've been in a terrible accident where or your child is in hospital in intensive care. People do extraordinary things under those situations. But if we try to live our whole life like that, we're just going to explode. So I think the whole point about the maintenance thing is to be able to let go of trying to do it right. That's one of the first things I teach people. And one of the biggest problems people have is they come to any kind of course trying to get it right. And there lies the problem. It's when we realize, like, one of the big things I had to realize in my life was that I'm not going to get it right and I'm not going to get it wrong. It's just not all about right and wrong. I think I picked up an idea when I was at school, maybe because I went to quite Christian schools, that if I got it right, God would somehow be happy with me. And even when I wasn't particularly a God person, that teaching was in there. And I think we all have it. If it's not God, it's my parents or my teacher or someone is going to be happy with me and reward me if I get it right. So I've got to get it right. And I somehow realized that if God is God, I can't get it right and I can't get it wrong, because, it doesn't somehow make any sense. And I started to let go of that. And the whole beauty of meditation is, to me, not about getting there. It's the other part of life which isn't about getting there. It's the part, if the way you bring up your children has no space for just being together, your children will end up very, very stressed and very anxious because they're constantly trying to perform. Most parents know that, and they make time to just be with their children. We know in our relationships we need to have time to just be together and not be performance driven in our relationship, because it's a killer of relationship. And actually business as well, a lot of the best business people meditate every day, and there's a very good reason why they do that, because it makes it that it's not all about the performance. It actually creates space for that being part. Because if you think about business, as you said, is largely about relationships. You can't do business without relationships, and you can't build trust in relationships by hammering performance and productivity. You actually need to be human together. And meditation is a fundamental practice, or relaxation, for not getting it right, just being there. It's like stillness. If you want to practice stillness, sometimes your stillness is going to be very noisy. But that's not a failure, it's just a noisy stillness. Another day you're going to experience beautiful, silent stillness, and then you're going to think, this is how I'm supposed to be all the time. It's like, no, that's just not correct.
Oh, I thought you meant my house with 3 young boys.
Well,
it's just going to be noisy.
Yeah.
You just got to learn how to tune it out.
But they go to sleep too.
I'm sorry?
They go to sleep too, and then it's still.
No. I did want to, what you said about the relationships and being there. And I think when it comes to meditation or building wealth, building money, I think everything done consistently has a cumulative effect. So if we are constantly checking in on our fellow humans, that's how you build a relationship. It's not a one-off thing. You don't slap a business card in somebody's hand and all of a sudden you've got a relationship. It takes time, just like meditating or healthy practices with money. So are there other healthy practices that you use to generate these connections with people, money, yourself?
For me, it's more about awareness, actually. I try to be really conscious. So if I notice something, like maybe something's feeling a bit off, I pay attention to it and I try to really connect with what's happening there and find a solution. So rather than applying a practice, what I do is really try to understand and sense what's going on and find a solution to whatever it is. So for me, it's much more about my awareness of things. So I try to be aware of what's going on in relationships or in my relationship with money. And look, I come from a background where we didn't talk about money. So my default pattern is to ignore it. And I need to pay attention to it. So how do I pay attention to it? I look at my bank account. And I actually enjoy looking at it now. I make time every week to look at the financial situation of my business. And I've had to really push myself to do that because it's not my natural position. And I use some things. There's a system called Profit First, which is a wonderful, wonderful system for small businesses that helps me to be disciplined around money and to take care of myself. Like most entrepreneurs, my tendency will be to put everybody else's needs first and pay myself last. And Profit First encourages me to do things the other way around. That's a book. So those things, but for me, the most important thing is to constantly tune my awareness so that I'm noticing things rather than ignoring them. Then pay attention to anything that either feels off or that if there's something I want to achieve, I need to pay attention there as well. And then do something, like really engage in the situation to change it. Don't just say, oh, well, it doesn't matter, it'll be okay. But actually say, what's needed here? What can I do here? How can I write this email differently? How can I communicate with this person to build more trust? So for me, it's a very human system. I don't use frameworks. I don't use, practices so much as I try to bring myself, my whole self, into whatever it is that I'm dealing with. That's my intention, and that's what I try to put into practice as much as I can.
Well, I think that's commendable. I mean, for me, if I don't have a routine or a reminder, I tend to get carried away with the day, and then by the end of the day, I haven't done those things that are good for me. Paying myself first, metaphysically as well as financially. So I like to have routines and systems in place, and that includes with relationships. But I totally agree, though. You need to take care of yourself because you won't be any good to others if you don't take if you're not good for yourself.
I also think, when I listen to you, I think that if you're a person who needs routines, that's incredibly important to respect that. Like everybody's a bit different, and some people do really well with routines. Some people love rituals. You talked about rituals a little while ago. I said I'm not very good at rituals. It's just not my style. But I do have the routine of the first thing I do every single morning is sit down and do my relaxation practice and things. So but I do think that some people need more than others. And actually the key to life is finding out how you work and what you need. And we all need some routine. We all need some ritual. We all need some spontaneity and some freedom. And all of us have to find our own balance in that, I think. And it sounds like you know pretty well what you need. And I think over the years, I've come to know pretty well what works for me. I'm constantly tweaking it, as I'm sure you are too.
Well,
But,
of course,
that's growing up, isn't it?
yeah. Without routine, it would just have chaos. But what is routine? But what we found that works. And
You've got 3 kids as well. I don't have any kids. So kids have a different kind of need for routine than 2 adults.
Absolutely. And they need the routine even more than I do. So yeah, if the backpack isn't put in exactly the same place it will end up in the pool or somewhere random, and with the other, that left shoe. And we had a kid miss the bus today because the backpack was gone. Anyways,
Yeah,
yeah, we need the
exactly.
routine, and it has to be pretty specific at times. And I'm just as bad. I'm like, I call myself the blindest person with shiny object syndrome. So I do need routine. And
Yes,
I,
and we need some discipline around that and some very clear goals at times and values. Otherwise, the bright, shiny object thing is very tempting. At least to some of us. I've spent a lot of my life with that.
well, I really do appreciate you sharing your time and your experience and your some of your philosophies with us, Point of Impact, myself, and I've thoroughly enjoyed this. Is there anything, Sarah, that I should have asked you and you would like to share with the audience before we wrap up?
No, there's nothing you should have asked me. I'm very happy with what we've talked about and I've enjoyed it very much. So thank you for that.
Well, then, before we finish, I'd like to go into our final segment, which is called the Countdown to Impact. And it's just a 3, 2, 1. Three books, two quotes or lessons learned, and one person who have all made an impact in your life.
Oh my goodness, I was not prepared for this.
I
Three
know I
books.
should probably give you a heads up. There's a quiz.
Yeah.
We did say
Three.
one. The prophet
No,
first.
that's okay. Well, I'm going to say a very funny book. This sounds really, really weird. The first book I'm going to mention, because it comes to my mind, is a book that I realized that I read about 25 times when I was a child, it's a book called Heidi. It's a little girl's kind of dream book. But when I reread it as an adult, I discovered it was all about healing. And all of my life turned out to be about healing. And I had no idea when I was a child that that would be the case. So I think that there was some premonition, there was something going on there that attracted me to that book, which I really had no idea of at the time. So that was an early one. I don't read a lot these days because I work with energy. I tend to try not to read a lot of secondhand information. I'm very, very selective about what I read. There was a book that was tremendously influential for me more than 20 years ago now. It's called Essence. And it taught me that I had an ego. I didn't know what an ego was. I'd learned about Freud and things. I knew about the Freudian kind of ego, but I didn't know about ego in perhaps a more spiritual language. That, there was this thing inside me that was blocking my progress as a human being. And reading that book was a life-changing moment for me because it showed me something about myself that needed attention and I had to go and do something about it. That was very important. It's a book by a guy called A.H. Almas. I don't know how I would relate to it now. It was a book of a moment that I needed. So I've got two books so far. I'll see if another one comes. Two quotes or things that I've learnt. Yes. Let's look at the really... Well, look, I've talked about relaxation here. I could be really, really boring about relaxation. I listened to an interview a little while ago of a guy who had been a kind of enlightened Buddhist monk, Western, but, really, really up there in the ranks of the spiritual elite, so to speak. And then he had an affair and lost his marriage and lost his status and standing in the world that he belonged to, lost it and lost all his money. And he finally came down to the only thing that held him together was very, very deep relaxation. And that interview made a profound impact on me as somebody who'd already been practicing it for probably 25 or 30 years. But to hear somebody who'd had that experience come to the same conclusion was very powerful for me. And the quote actually, which I won't get right, but I continue to just see is so important in our world, is that we we don't solve problems at the level that they're created. And when we go to the level above, where the problems are created, the solutions we find there make those problems obsolete. That's a kind of Sarah version of, I think, a Buckminster Fuller and Einstein put together. But I think that kind of thinking is incredibly important. We need to understand that if we dig around in the problems, we're never going to find a solution that satisfies. And if we can go to a higher perspective, the problem doesn't exist. And that, I would say, is really important for my life. And what was the one thing I needed to find?
One person who's made an impact in your life.
It's funny, I'm terrible. I'm really bad at these things because I've never really had heroes or idols. I'm not a collector of these things. A person who's made an impact on my life. Well, I'll roll two people into one. I had two music teachers when I was around 17, 18, 19. One taught me the piano and one taught me the oboe. And music was what really held my life together at that point. And they both showed me a place to express myself, and they saw potential in me at that time when I was very locked up as a human being. I was very British, emotionally buttoned up, very closed, and they opened my world by giving me, rather than just teaching me the piano like you teach every other kid in the school, my piano teacher saw potential in me and taught me how to kind of express myself through the piano. And my oboe teacher, the same. He showed me phrasing. He showed me beauty that could come out of me with this instrument. And I'm not a musician now, but somehow I often talk about the music of life, and that we're a composer and a conductor and a player and the audience of the music of our life. And so I think that musical experience, once it became not routine, but it became really deeply human and expressive, has played a part in my life that has often gone unacknowledged, but it's like part of the underlying fabric of who I am. So I'm deeply grateful that those people saw me.
That's an excellent example. I think that paints such a great picture. Well, Sarah, thank you so much. You've certainly made an impact in my life today, as well as our audience. If somebody wanted to get a hold of you or learn more, where would they go?
The simplest place is to go to my website, which is my name, sarahmccrum.com. McCrum is MCCRUM.
And that's Sarah with an H.
Sarah with an H.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much, and have a great evening.